For so long, I've wanted to make a game, and I've talked about this in the past on Fractured Thinking. It's probably the thing that stuck with me for the longest. And I always, I suppose, figured that if I am a game developer, that I've made a game. And I think over time that started to change. Where I would start to say, okay, I am a game developer because I will make a game. And then it was always, I wanted to be a game developer, and that's why I need to make a game, so that I can, create this identity for myself. And something I've talked about on recent Fractured Thinkings is that at the start of 2026 / the end of 2025, I told myself I'm going to make one prototype a month. One game prototype a month, make 12 games, then I'll choose one and stick with it at the end or something like that. But before the year started, I was like, this is not gonna happen. It's very possible that I make 11 out of 12 of these games, but I still see it as a failure. And at the time, I was dealing with learned helplessness, and I still am, but that was the most potent way I was dealing with it. And so, I can tell myself I'm a storyteller, and I tell my stories through games. But at the end of the day, that vision is always based around the result of a game. Right? You can measure success by, I'm a game developer because I've released a game. I even making Type Skier, I was like, I finally, I made a game, it's out there. I gotta accept that about myself. But it still didn't sit right with me, because there's no metric that ever would. I think a part of me thought that I would need to make a really big game that I would be known for, right? Eric Brown is known for Stardew Valley, DevDuck is known for Dolphin, these kinds of things. Or a studio is known for a game. And I think it would be, this notion that when people think of this game, they think of me, and when they think of me, they think of this game, that I am one and the same. And, that's still kind of the goal. But a couple days ago, I had a realization when I was working, and I'm a software engineer by day at a fantasy sports company. And I was thinking about the whole idea of being a product-focused engineer. And I realized that I am a product-focused, or, was a product-focused game developer, where you're focused on the end result so much that you create a plan to get there. And this is like the 10th Fractured Thinking, I think, where I'm just talking about how the journey is more important than the destination, but it's just a new way of thinking about it, and it's been helping me out the last couple days. So, figured I'd talk about it. It's pretty much just product versus process. And at the end of the day, it's not about what we create that defines us, it's what we put our time into that defines us. I forget where I read this, but it was like people in the US, you ask them what they do, and they're like, oh, my job is blah, blah, blah. But in France, you ask people what they do, and they're like, oh, in my free time, I do X, Y, Z. And I think, there's a big cultural thing there. But at the end of the day, I live in the US, and I think that's how I think. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a software engineer. Oh, who are you? I'm a software engineer. And ultimately, it's because that's what I put my time into. If you're a student, whether you choose to or not, whether you do so begrudgingly or through sheer force of will or through discipline, or you're motivated to get a degree, at the end of the day, you're putting your time into being a student. And I think, with one of my biggest problems, I think the two I talk about are watching TV/YouTube and overeating. That's kind of how I define myself. I'm someone who watches YouTube and eats a lot. But the thing is, in every moment when we're putting our time into something, I think we get to choose who we are, right? Now, it's very easy, for me at least, to be aware now that I should be doing something else. This morning I woke up and I lay down on my couch and I thought, I've really got to go take my shower. Then I'll get on with my day, yada yada. And now I'm starting to, you know, change that thinking into, am I someone who wakes up and lies on the couch right now? Yeah, I am. Am I okay with that? I think, you know, this morning I was like, yeah, I'm okay with that. Because I think I turn lying on the couch into something different. But, you know, when I come back from a jiu-jitsu class, I don't want to be someone who comes back from his workout and eats a bunch of sugar. Because he earned it or whatever. You know, when it's a holiday and the gym closes except for the Friday 6 a.m. class, I don't want to be the guy who... It's like, oh, it's a holiday, I'm going to take the day off. Like, there's no judgment here. That's just not who I want to be. And I think, you know, I made it to class and I got to be one of the people there. And that's ultimately made me feel better. I was tired, you know, whatever. The metaphor I have written down is that instead of, you know, when you sit down and do pottery, you're not trying to make something, you're just molding the clay. And something I realized about drawing, I think last week, was that you're never going to draw the thing. You are only ever going to draw a representation of the thing. When people look at art and see a thing or the thing in it, it's only because it's a decently accurate representation of it. And I think when we draw something, we know all the imperfections that go into it, and they're so obvious to us. We know the secret, that it's not a wolf. It's not a treasure chest. It's just a bunch of lines in the page, but when people see it, they recognize the whole image. And I'm starting to wonder, with art at least, you know, and this is just, surely I'm just cracking open this realization and have so far to go with this train of thought, but maybe that's what art is. It's learning to see not only the world around you and how to represent it, but how we can see our own art and work backwards to get to the end result. But nonetheless, this whole process versus product thing, you know, where we put our time is who we are. I think with game development, right, I was doing this hour every morning thing, and then I started doing jiu-jitsu every morning, most mornings, as well as in the evenings, and so my game development fell by the wayside. And so I didn't really touch the game for about 2.5 weeks. And just yesterday I said, okay, we're going to do a no 0 day policy, just touch the game every day. Could be 5 minutes, could be 3 hours. And I think that's what I'm going to be doing going forward for the rest of the year, at least. Because I do want to finish my 2 more prototypes. And I feel this sense of like, oh, I wish I did this today. I know I should do that today. And I'm going to keep pushing that. Just going to try not to beat myself up too much. But ultimately, I want to do that because that's who I want to be. But I already am that person. That's why I do that. It's a bit of an Ouroboros situation. And so therefore, it's like, well, how are we what we put our time into? You know, what if I put my whole life into this thing and nothing ever amounts from it? I would say you still are that thing. If you're a failed novelist, or a successful novelist, or a bad artist or a good artist, or a consistent game developer or an inconsistent game developer, I hate to say it, but you're still those things. Because it's just the adjective that changes. And I think, I don't know, I guess it's lived experience is the answer to this, but I had a really stressful, I'd say 2.5, 3 weeks at my job, because what I was working on, I just wasn't motivated to work on it. And it's a very lucky thing that I get to be able to say, right? Like, some jobs are, for someone like me, easier if you're constantly just told what to do. And what you need to do is very clear cut and dry. And there's a reason I don't go to those jobs. They don't provide me with a certain challenge that I seek, which is probably why I ended up in software engineering, part of the reason. But one of the challenges with that is I do have to, you know, be my own carrot and be my own stick. But sometimes you just work on something and it's It's almost anti-motivating. And it is what it is. It's work. You know, work is work. And it just made the 3 weeks very stressful because I kept giving myself deadlines and not meeting them. Because I just gave myself an outrageous timeline. And I was so stressed. But there were these 2 days where I just said, okay, we're going to just focus on working. I'm not going to try and meet, you know, certain goals. And they were the most focused 2 days of those 3 weeks by far. I knew what I was working toward, but ultimately I focused on the process of what I was working on over the product. The product is obviously still important. Now, from my understanding, when we say product focused engineer or something like that, it's you know, in contrast to data focused. You know, do what the data says. You want to do what is best for the product, what is best for the users. As someone, you know, you're in the app or the website or whatever, and you're using it and something goes wrong and you're like, oh, the product element here is bad. That's product focused. User focused is even different. The product can feel great, but if all the users hate it, you want to go with what the users do or what the product needs. Anyway, there's a lot of also intersections, the big Venn diagram in my head. But I think what I've just kept failing with, and I've come to this realization over and over, is that with games, I make these plans and these Trello boards. And, you know, with Seashell a couple of years ago, 4 years ago now, I made all the Trello boards, all the cards first, 5 years ago. And then I didn't really do anything. And now with these last prototypes, I made the cards as I went, which is way better. But it still became, at some point, tasks to pull off of a board. And so what I decided with the next idea, you know, to finish this one, I have like 6-7 items on my written to-do list. But for my next idea, what I've decided is that I'm not going to have any task list, because I don't want to sit down thinking, oh, I already, you know, it's it's today's dictated. Today's work is dictated. Right? I want to sit down to work on the game, touch it, and just go wherever I see fit. You know, I'll probably end up writing stuff down. It's who I am at the end of the day. It just is. But I find that when I don't have this product, this end result that I need to stay so focused on, and this, again, this applies in the work. There is an end result that's necessary. Don't get me wrong. You know, if you're going to make a game, you need to have an end result. Otherwise, you become Yondir Dev, right? But each day doesn't need to be so stressful when it's your own work. And I think what stresses me out more is the fact that I'm not creating, that I'm not producing. And I'm starting to really connect with the fact that I'm not beating myself up over not having a game done. You know, it's so easy for me to think, man, I still haven't made a game after almost 10 years of really wanting to do this. But what frustrates, you know, that used to frustrate me, and it's still easy for that thought to happen. But what gets me now, can I get this in like a thumbnail angle here, Mr. Owl? Ooh, I like that. What really gets me now is that I'm not who I want to be because I'm not spending my time making games. Right now, in this moment, I don't mind who I am. I'm talking out some thoughts on this pretty chill video game. It's nice and vibey. Inspires me to make something like this. And right now I am whatever this is. And I think what bums me out is that when I'm lying on the couch in the morning is not a great example because I no longer have a huge issue with that. But when I'm, watching another episode of The Bear, when I said I'd stop after the last one, I don't want to be that person. That's what doesn't settle with me. I'm working on rewiring and not to say, oh, I should be working on my game right now. Because no, you shouldn't be doing anything. You're an animal on a rock. Like, relax. Again, work is work, so I've put that aside for this analogy. This is why I'm talking about my projects. But ultimately, when I realized that, like, in this moment, I'm someone who's just binge watching. And, in this analogy, it's two metaphors. I used to be someone who definitely binge watched. But to me, that's kind of what it is. When you say that you're going to stop and then you don't, you're binging something. And I don't want to be a binge watcher. And so in those moments, I just tell myself, or at least I'm working on it. It's very new thinking, so it's not really happening that often. But hey, like, I am what I put my time into. If I want to be a game developer here, I need to put some time into my game. That's what I want to do with this one wild and precious life. I don't want to be a binge watcher. Like, yeah, the story's good and I might learn something from the story, but like, I'm done being a consumer. I think a year ago I realized, it's the time for consumption is done. The time to produce is now. I think also what a realization that this was built on was the whole notion of expectation, where it wasn't actually the results weighing me down, but the expectations of what my time would amount to. And I'm kind of just foregoing all of that. I'm going so deeply inside myself that I'm trying to forego all expectations. And, I've been meditating a lot more recently, relatively speaking. But I just know that at the end of the day, I get more done when I can just lean into something and embrace whatever it is. And not enter with this is good or this is bad, but enter it with just that it is. Like, relationship stuff, you can project so much of what you might want. But at the end of the day, it just is, and you can just let it evolve day by day. With a video, you can imagine how great it might be. TypeSkier still didn't hit 1,000 views. That sucks. But that's because I went into that video with the expectation it would do well. And now I'm returning to this, you know what? I'm chasing the money. I'm chasing the number. I'm chasing I want to be independent. And that's something I realize I want. I don't want to be working for someone else. I don't want to be creating someone else's dream. I want to not necessarily be able to make my own dream. I still don't know if I have a dream, but I do want to make things for myself, and I want to live independently. I want to live for myself. I don't work for myself. And I think that's, something I accepted like yesterday. And I want to take the steps to get there. I just don't want to strong arm myself into it. And I think I'm on the right track. I just need to remember, like, hey, this is what I want. And if I'm going to be that person, yeah, you got to be a bit disciplined. And I guess I am disciplined, but there are certain qualities I need if I want to work for myself, right? Because if I'm working for myself, I'm also working for myself. If I am my own boss, then I am also must be aware of who I am hiring. Does that make sense? Because on one hand, it's like, oh, cool, I'm my own boss. I get to make my own hours, whatever. And I'm making this a very surface level thing. I think I could be a very grueling boss to myself. But also, if you are the boss, and therefore you have an employee, and that employee is you. Hate to break it to you, right? Anyway, I'm like straying so far from kind of the main topic, but I think I accept that I'm a very much jack of all trades person. And what's particularly relevant about that is, as a jack of all trades, you're not defined by any of the one things that you do. I think game development attracts me because it's the combination of so many things that I enjoy doing, but if I'm spending time drawing and spending time programming, I am each of those ones in a particular moment. Am I both of those things? I don't know. But whenever I'm doing those things, I am one of them. And I want to be someone who draws to relax when he's got time off, when work is done. Not someone who comes back and watches TV. And I accept tired and fatigue. You know, I've been training 2 days jiu-jitsu some days, and I get back in the night and I'm like, oh my god, I just cannot get myself to draw or do this thing. But I think as I learn to lean into it, as I learn to not expect it to be good or bad or whatever it might be, I'll be able to pick up a pen in the evening and just draw. Hop in a voice channel with people and just draw. Because at the end of the day, that's all it is. I'm choosing to be an artist at that moment. I'm choosing to be someone who improves himself at that moment. I'm not choosing to be someone who watches TV at that moment. And I think I guess what I'm feeling is that when I frame this in this way, I'm no longer fighting something. I'm no longer saying, oh, I need to do art instead of TV. It's like, in that mentality feels like I'm drawn to the TV, drawn to then take a nap. And I'm pulling myself away from it. But if I just kind of work on telling myself, like, I am what I spend my time on. I am what I put my time into. Hey, I am someone who draws and wants to get better at drawing. And then thinking about sitting down and drawing is no longer this wrenching feeling. It's almost a gravitational pull to do the right thing. And I think once I sit down and draw a couple lines, we're in. That doesn't make it easy. I know that I still have to draw, 4 non-hooved quadrupeds. I still have to work through this anatomy book. But that decision comes after I start to put marks on the page. Marks, got them. Once I accept in a particular moment, I'm going to draw now because I am an artist and I'm choosing to be a drawer, a sketcher. That's kind of a cool thumbnail as well. Then becomes, oh, okay, now I will work on this anatomy book. But if it's, I'm watching TV, another episode, oh, I should be working on the anatomy book. There's just a subjective difference that I've been trying to describe for 20 minutes. So, that's my 2 cents. I just think, I guess I saw this thing that was about how we are what we choose to live or whatever, and I turned that into what we spend our time on, given my own view of life and death. And if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, The thought used to be, I don't want to get hit by a bus, and realize I never made a game. But the thought now is, if I get hit by a bus, I can think, you know what? I spent my time doing what I wanted to do. And for me, that's how they made a game. And contemplating death can be a weird thing. It's definitely an individual. I'm not going to talk about it. But I think that's just an extreme hyperbole to also demonstrate my point, because I'm trying to describe this from various points of view. Anyway, it's getting away from me a little bit, but what do you put your time into? You know, are you recognizing this? Leave a comment down below. Subscribe if you've liked what I'm talking about. The first step, I've heard this in addiction recovery. I've heard this in meditation. I've heard this in freaking productivity books. The first step is awareness. Oh my God, I'm drifting already. Okay, cool. The first step of being aware is being aware of where you are. Whether that be your skill level in art or jiu-jitsu, you have to know where you are in order to really understand where you want to be and where you're going to be and where you're going to get. You know, you can't be a purple belt in jiu-jitsu if you don't understand why you're a blue belt. Personal example. You're not going to be a magical speed artist if you know, like Peter Han, if you don't know why you're not yet, should you choose to believe that. And that's just awareness. That's all it is. I think I've already used this as a thumbnail before. Oh well. You know, you can't be aware that something is bad for you until you're aware that something is bad for you. Which, that one sounds silly, I know, but that's just what it is. So you can't be aware of who you are until you can't know who you are until you're aware of what you put your time into, I guess, is the thesis of what I'm trying to say. But I am getting away from my original point in some degree. So thanks for watching and or listening. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts if you agree or disagree with this notion that we are what we put our time into, as opposed to whether we are what we have done with our lives. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. And as always, don't forget to stay awesome. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.